NBC News has learned Haitian migrants who were deported to Haiti today attacked pilots and immigration officers on another flight after it landed in Port-au-Prince. So the plane carrying single adult men were released from the aircraft to Haitian authorities on the airport tarmac. Then NBC News reports several of those men stormed another recently arrived jet carrying families. The Biden administration has been ramping up the flights after more than 15,000 mostly Haitian migrants crossed into Texas from Mexico and set up a makeshift camp under a bridge. In Del Rio, here's NBC's Morgan Chesky.
Shep, numbers are going down here in Del Rio, but there are still about 8,600 migrants beneath the border bridge about a half mile from where I'm standing. Processing those people an absolute priority because of the brutal conditions here. It's still reaching about 100 degrees during the day. And while they are getting a little food and water, I have had migrants tell me what is being handed out is not enough. As it stands right now, we know that many of these migrants have been taken to nearby shelters and or processing centers. We had a chance to speak to one 25-year-old man who told us that he's on his way to Houston before hopefully connecting with family in Brooklyn. But he told us of the struggles beneath that bridge for the past week with his pregnant wife, saying that at one point he swam back to Mexico to buy enough food and water so that his family would be okay because he couldn't rely on what was being handed out by the government. Now, we heard from Secretary Mayorkas earlier today, who said despite the current size of the encampment here, the goal is to have everything cleared out, everyone processed within the next 10 days. However, when you see the sheer size of it still beneath that bridge, it remains to be seen if that will actually happen in the next week or so. Shep?
Morgan, thanks.
Last night, we first told you about an incident south of Kingsville involving some of those Haitian migrants. Homeland Security was taking a group of them by bus to Brownsville when there was some sort of revolt on board the bus.
The Clayburgh County Sheriff told 3 News that the migrants fought with agents, forced the bus to stop, and then escaped. Well, tonight, our Michael Gibson has images and video of the incident itself, something state leaders brought to Governor Abbott's attention during that border press conference.
We saw something yesterday that we knew was going to happen.
Brandon Judd is the president of the National Border Patrol Council. The union head was here in Del Rio at this news conference with Governor Abbott, spotlighting the Haitian migrant crisis there.
If you are targeting Texas to come to, we're going to show up in force and shut down the border.
But as you heard, Brandon Judd began talking about an incident we first told you about on 3 News Monday night. We learned that a busload of Haitian migrants were being sent from Del Rio to Brownsville. When the bus was 25 miles south of Kingsville on Highway 77, the migrants began fighting with federal agents to get off that bus.
When those people that were in buses south of Kingsville, Texas, when they found out that they were going to be sent back to Haiti, they took the bus over and they fled.
Clayburgh County Sheriff Richard Kirkpatrick was one of a number of lawmen who showed up to the scene to help out the agents.
These illegal migrants assaulted the federal agents on the bus and somehow several of them managed to escape custody for a brief moment in time. And agents then had to chase them down, again, get in another scuffle on the side of the road with these individuals to try to detain them.
We spoke with one woman who had sent in photos and video of the bus incident to 3 News. She didn't want to be identified, but she did agree to speak with us about the situation.
It's scary because it's not going to get any better. It doesn't seem that it's going to get any better anytime soon.
During the governor's news conference, it was disclosed that there are still some 8,600 Haitian migrants at the Del Rio border. It's unclear if Homeland Security will continue to bus any more of those folks from that city to Brownsville after what happened here south of Kingsville on Monday evening. Michael Gibson, 3 News.
3 News did contact Border Patrol about this incident, and this was their statement. This request would need to go to ICE Public Affairs Office as it was their bus. They continue to say the individuals were not in Border Patrol custody. 3 News also reached out to the Department of Homeland Security, but they did not agree to an interview. Another group of migrants who did not come from the bridge in Del Rio passed through San Antonio's airport on Sunday. The group of about 400 are mostly Haitian, but they will not be expelled. They're being flown across the country to host families who will care for them as they seek asylum here in the U.S. Experts say many Haitians have been desperate to get out of their country since the 2010 earthquake. Some found work in South America, but those jobs all but disappeared during the pandemic.
That desperation seen in the Haitian migrants trying to cross the border, partly due to a recent earthquake that destroyed or damaged nearly 130,000 homes.
Haiti's president was also assassinated earlier this year, you may remember. Our State Department recently issued a travel advisory telling Americans not to visit Haiti because of the civil unrest, crime, and COVID-19. Eddie Canales, a South Texas immigrant rights activist, says those Haitians acted in desperation because they're fearful of returning to their country.
Now, Canales believes the Haitian migrants at our state's border should be welcomed into the country and not deported back to Haiti.
There needs to be, immediate humanitarian parole given to the Haitians in this country, and as temporary protected status or as refugees, and figure out what's going on. And did any actions take place into Haiti to keep people from leaving, in terms of relief after the earthquake? I doubt it very much.
Now, the U.S. did commit to send $32 million for Haiti earthquake relief, but the United Nations says a total of $200 million is needed. As far as those Haitians at the border, Canales feels that their asylum claims should be heard instead of having them placed on a plane flown back to Haiti.
Good evening to you. I'm Jenny Day. Adonis will be back tomorrow. Well, people in Yuma are outraged that illegal border crossers are being put up in a hotel before others like veterans and the homeless. The international crisis impacting us right here at home. News 11's Arlette Youssef joining us live outside of that Best Western in the foothills. Good evening, Jenny. That's right. Locals are frustrated that migrants are being housed so close to home. Some Foothills residents are not thrilled about the amount of resources allocated to house migrants while they are being processed. One protester says resources need to be provided to others.
I'm totally against it because we have homeless veterans that need help, and we're always told there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. But we can allocate $365 a person a day to house.
I have reached out to Endeavors, the organization said to be facilitating this migrant housing. In an email response, a representative for the organization said, quote, "We can confirm that DHS has contracted with Endeavors to provide critical services to migrant families, which is a continuation of services we have delivered to the migrant population since 2012. Yuma County Chairman Tony Reyes confirms that the county is not paying for migrant housing and that this is a federally funded project.
We're not in charge of that, and we're not responsible for that. And the lines of communications between Endeavor, which is the company that the federal government has hired, and us, are pretty nebulous. As a matter of fact, that was part of the complaint at yesterday's board meeting.
Chairman Reyes says while county officials do not agree with the way the situation is being handled, services must be provided to migrants as they go through processing. As far as who stays and who goes, it's complicated. Migrants who have a criminal record are immediately deported. For others, it's a matter of which country the U.S. has an agreement with and whether the migrant is an adult or a minor. It all makes a difference. But for the majority, they have 72 hours to be processed with Border Patrol and another 72 hours with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And then it's truly just based on the honor system. The border crosser is released into our community and given a court date to return. A counter-protester at the hotel, David Coulter, says he agrees that veterans and the homeless should receive help, but that migrants need help too.
This is America. I feel like we're a great country. And I want to welcome people with open arms into our country, especially people that are coming from terrible situations.
A community divided on what seems to be a never-ending situation. There are talks of future protests, however, some are said to be at different locations. Now we will continue to bring you the latest on migrant housing right here and on KYMA.com. Reporting live in Yuma, Arlette Youssef, News 11. Jenny, back to you.
Arlette, thanks. And Vice President Kamala Harris was asked today about the migrant crisis. She has called some images horrible and deeply troubling. She also commented on the need to help the people and country of Haiti.
Listen, the whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, the head of state assassinated. And we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very big.
Yeah, so the Biden administration also saying tonight to expect changes at the border soon. This as video has surfaced that appears to show U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback confronting migrants. Camila Bernal continues our coverage.
Border Patrol agents on horseback appearing to use aggressive tactics when confronting migrants. This Al Jazeera video causing concern within the Biden administration.
I was horrified by what I saw. I'm going to let the investigation run its course, but the pictures that I observed troubled me profoundly.
Thousands of migrants, many of them Haitian, still gathered under the Del Rio International Bridge in Texas.
It's an impossible situation, which absolutely has to get corrected with a policy change.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said the department would investigate the situation and said a dramatic change at the border is expected in the next 48 to 96 hours.
We are moving more migrants very quickly to other processing centers so that we can ensure their security and safety and the security and safety of the community.
But many hoping more is done to address immigration beyond the current situation.
There needs to be more enforcement of our current laws, but it also needs to happen at a much quicker rate. At this point, we shouldn't be Republicans or Democrats. We need to come together, and we need to get through this crisis together.
I'm Camila Bernal reporting.
Haitian migrants actually being released into the United States despite the Biden administration claiming the opposite. Joining us now is Ron Vitiello, former acting ICE director under President Trump and a former chief of Border Patrol under President Obama. So we've learned that a lot of these migrants are being sent to various places around the United States, throughout Texas and cities elsewhere. We don't know exactly where they're going, what the justification for that is. Your thoughts about what we're seeing here, Ron?
Well, this is the point, right? They're coming in this kind of number, in this volume, and causing this kind of chaos because they know that many of them, even if they're apprehended, will be released into the United States. And so those images that we're seeing from Del Rio should disturb all of us. Right, left, or center, we do not deserve that kind of condition on our soil in the United States. I've never seen anything like it. We got a 500% increase from the encounters from last year. We went 2 months in a row with well over 200,000 encounters. And the reason that flow is coming to the border is because the policies that stopped the last surge at our border, which was much, much smaller than what we're seeing today, were rescinded on January 20th. And so we've sent a signal to the world that says, if you come now because you have a chance of getting away because the Border Patrol is distracted by this humanitarian and crowd control mission. And then you're likely to get released if you have a child or you are a child, a minor coming by yourself. Yeah. And so that signal has gone across the globe, including people who were already in this hemisphere that happen to be from Haiti.
Yeah, there's also the matter of what administration officials and what this White House is saying about how they're going to deal with these migrants versus how they're actually dealing with them. Listen to what the DHS secretary said the other day.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned. Your journey will not succeed, and you will be endangering your life and your family's lives.
That statement, Ron, did not appear to have the added benefit of being true.
Correct. And what does it mean that they'll be returned? They'll be put in proceedings for immigration court and asked to report on their own recognizance somewhere in the United States. And he knows, and all of us know that have done this for more than 5 minutes, that many of them will never show up for that asylum claim or for that immigration hearing. And so, yeah, they'll be put in the system to be removed, but it might be decades before they're back into the custody of ICE for a removal. And so saying that they're going to be removed is not accurate.
Yeah, so the Biden administration really does appear to be caught between a rock and a hard place here. When you look at the aerial shots that are just over your left shoulder here on the screen, that is bad politically for the Biden administration. But sending those migrants back to Haiti is also bad for the Biden administration because progressives on the far left of his party are screaming bloody murder about what's going to happen with these folks.
Yeah, it's easy to say you want an open border until you see what happens, what's happening now in Del Rio. That's the result of policies that express to the world that we're going to have an open border. We've gutted immigration enforcement in the interior. We've encouraged people to send or bring their children to the border, and these are the results of it. And so our heart goes out to people from places like Haiti, where the governance is terrible, where living conditions are horrible, the Northern Triangle, where gangs and corruption are endemic. But if we're going to have a country, we're going to need to have a border. And if people want to come and claim asylum, if they're truly refugees outside of the United States, then let's make room for them in the law. And having an open border or pretending that you're securing the border when you're really not, it's just not going to work. You're encouraging people to be in this behavior. And the only winners in this are the cartels, because the people in the pipeline are at great danger during the journey. The logistics of being in overcrowded vehicles and stash houses. They're getting picked off by human smugglers and traffickers. And then, obviously, the Border Patrol, distracted, can't protect us from large amounts of drugs, other narcotics coming into the United States.
Yeah, and then, you know, there's also Texas having to take away resources for public safety as well to deal with this because the federal government can't. Ron Vitiello, good to get your take on this. Appreciate it.
A nonprofit's request to the Delano City Council to pay $80,000 in legal fees for undocumented people is causing some concern in that community. David Kaplan is in Studio B with more on what's going on there. David?
Dave, the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation gave a presentation to the Delano City Council at their August 16th meeting. The nonprofit asked the City Council for $80,000 for the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund. Delano resident David Vivas Jr. says the money would help up to 32 undocumented people. He says there are many undocumented people that won't get help, and that those that do get the financial help will only get some, not enough to cover all their costs.
Many residents here in Delano are in total opposition and disagreement that money should be used to help people, 32 people to be exact, with legal services. I don't know how many undocumented individuals that are here in Delano, but I'm sure that those who will not be selected, if this is passed, are going to be greatly disappointed.
The Delano City Council was scheduled to discuss the item at tonight's City Council meeting, but the mayor tabled the discussion. I reached out to the Delano City Council and was not given a comment. In studio, David Kaplan, Eyewitness News.
Well, despite the Biden administration claiming Haitians camped in a Texas border town face deportation, U.S. officials say thousands are being let into the U.S. with nothing more than a notice to appear at an immigration court within 60 days. Our Bill Malusian earlier showed us those photos of the Haitians who entered the country illegally at the local airport, seated on commercial flights, jetting off to cities across America. Kevin McCarthy yesterday ripped the Biden administration. Watch.
These images don't show a border under control, as President Biden promised. Instead, they're a picture of chaos, incompetence, and a crisis. This is more than a disaster. It is a direct threat to American safety.
Lee and Najla Weathersby live in Del Rio, Texas. They join us now. Lee, I know you have lived there all of your life. You and your neighbors have got to be furious. What are you seeing on the ground? What are you hearing from folks there?
Oh, it's just, it's tragic. It's tragic what's going on here. And,
We're frightened. We're scared. What frightens us is we have a madman and a racist who's using people to advance his political agenda to collapse our border and change our style of government, and that's scaring us. To use these people like they're being used is just is unconscionable. It shouldn't be done, and that's what he's doing. And this is all planned. This didn't just happen overnight. This is not a spur of the moment deal. It's been going on for a long time.
Lee, the president said that he plans to get the situation under control. Let's just take a look at this quick clip from yesterday.
Mr. President, what's your reaction to the images coming from the southern border? Get it under control. Get it under control, or you have it under control? We will get it under control.
Najla, tell me what you see in terms of your community. I know that there's thousands of people there. They have to be fed, and they have to try to provide some humanitarian considerations for them. What are you witnessing?
It is horrible, Dana. It's absolutely horrible. I can't believe this has been pre-planned. It should have been done a better way. They should have had a place for these people to be, rather than just be there, run into the river, get infections, get diseases. I don't know where the money is coming from to feed all those people when we have so many homeless people, when we have so many vets living on the streets. They just keep signing all these checks and spending all this money. They have no plan whatsoever. I personally, as an immigrant, I love this country. I love America. I am heartbroken over what's happening, and I just pray to God that things will change soon. It's really very difficult for me to witness that. I sympathize with them, but I sympathize with us as well, because they should have not left their home. The administration keeps saying we told them not to come. That's easier said than done. You don't do that. And I've gone through immigration areas in the Middle East in 1967, Dana, in 1967, when we had an influx of refugees come to Jordan from the West Bank. The Jordanian government had units ready to go for them. They furnished them with whatever needed bedding and blankets and kitchen supply.
We hear you in terms of especially share your empathy. You said that you're an immigrant yourself, and you empathize. Thank you so much, Lee and Najla Weathersby. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
You asked me a question about Biden's comment yesterday.
Well, I wanted to make sure that your wife had a chance to speak, sir, but if you want to just comment real quickly on President Biden says he will get it under control.
You know, President Biden had to drop out of the presidential race for lying, and I don't think you can trust anything the man says.
All right. That is a strong opinion. We appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much.
Developing story on the fate of thousands of migrants camped out on the border in Del Rio, Texas. The Associated Press reports many people from the mostly Haitian group are now being allowed to remain in the U.S. while they seek asylum. Now, that's after a number of recent deportation flights back to Haiti. CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorges has the latest on the border crisis.
President Biden says his administration is handling the influx of mostly Haitian migrants at the southern border.
The Biden administration is a man-made disaster of inhumanity, of epic proportions.
Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott visited the camp Tuesday, expressing doubts that all the migrants would be processed soon.
The only thing that they've shown is an incapability of dealing with this crisis, candidly, in a way where they pretend it doesn't even exist. And we're here to tell you, it exists.
Border Patrol agents that were seen on horseback grabbing and lashing out at migrants are now on administrative duties pending a Homeland Security investigation. The administration has sent additional Border Patrol agents to the area as more than 8,000 migrants remain in the camp. With other sections of the river now off limits, this shallower stretch of the Rio Grande has become a lifeline. Many come over here to the Mexican side to buy food to bring back to their families at the bridge camp. Gregorio Jean-Pierre arrived with his wife and child. He crossed into Mexico looking for food for them. You heard about the deportation?
Sí, como tres aviones se fue.
And what do you think? ¿Qué piensas de eso?
¿Por qué hacer eso?
Why do that?
Porque
No sé, todavía
Si te
nadie lo
regresan
sabe.
a Haití, ¿qué tienes ahí? Do you have anything in Haiti?
Nada.
As we visited the Mexican side, we noticed that authorities there are also cracking down and limiting the movements of those migrants, leaving many of them feeling stuck. And of course, their biggest fear remains deportation. Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Del Rio, Texas.
A call of action today after some really shocking images have surfaced during mass deportations for migrants camped out at that bridge in Texas.
A protest happening right now in our area. Local 10 News reporter Delano Milberg, who traveled to Texas this week, joins us live from Miami to tell us about this demonstration. Glenna.
You know, Janice, Christy, this is very much a local South Florida story, and the people you see here gathering actually in front of Miami's immigration office, where so many Haitians already in our community go to their appointments as they go through the process of what various immigration processes. These people are furious at what they are seeing at the border. So they've gathered here. They're stopping traffic, as you can see, about to start a press conference. But let me take you to some video of what they've been doing all morning long. They just want deportation stopped. That's kind of the headline. Watching the flights ongoing at the border since Sunday, they are clearly demanding that the United States grant each and every Haitian and the people at the border asking for asylum, give them that due process for that claim. Let me show you images from the border we've been watching all weekend and all last week. The nation is riveted on what was almost 15,000, mostly Haitians, gathering in an encampment, squalid conditions, actually waiting there, not rushing the border at all, but waiting for their chance to claim asylum. And those images and that crisis brought a sudden and dramatic action from U.S. agents, mass deportations, images of border agents and aggressive actions to shut down the border there, to stop people from coming in. We learned that so many paid a lot of money, thousands of dollars, to smugglers who promised them that it was going to be possible to avoid going to Haiti, back to social and economic and political crisis there, and to find a better life here, only to be stopped.
They need to treat us like a people. I understand everything, but like Asian people, everything happened before. They do every bad thing to us. They treat you like a dog, like a slave. For now, it's very, very bad the way they treat us.
First of all, stop all deportations. They are here in the U.S. already. There's a law for that. Because they're here, they are asylum seekers.
There really is, at the moment, no infrastructure, no process for doing that kind of processing with that kind of crowd at the southern border. And of course, you saw the Biden administration very much messaging that the border is indeed closed to dissuade what is going on right now, right there. As you mentioned, Christy, Janice, we did get back late last night. We did see the planes taking off, deporting hundreds and hundreds of people from the border. It's about half empty now, that encampment that you saw. We also saw a lot of people being given that chance to stay in the United States and claim asylum. We saw them not only there, but we saw them on the flights to New York, to Florida. And we're trying to figure out who gets to do each. That answer has been really hard to come by, but we're going to show you some of those images, and hopefully we'll have some of that information for you as this day continues on Local 10 News. I'm Glenna Milberg in Miami, reporting live today, Local 10 News.
So let's bring in Webb County, Texas Judge Tano Tijerina. Judge, thanks for being with myself and with Shannon. We are trying to get Bill Malugin back up again, but first of all, let's talk to you. So thousands of illegal migrants at that Del Rio camp being released into the United States. We don't know where they're going. Some are staying in Texas. Others are going to places elsewhere across the country. Your thoughts on what we're seeing down there?
Well, absolutely right. You know, President Biden, here's a press secretary just talking a little bit, and she's talking about President Biden's border plan. You know, the border plan, he stipulates that he wants order and justice. He wants smart solutions. He wants fair and orderly tech and infrastructure and keeping families together. You know, they're talking about him being a senator and when everybody else. Well, you tell me as a president, what has he done? I invite President Biden to come down to the border. Speaking to my other colleagues, the other county judges, absolutely. Right now, on compounding the situation that we have right now, absolutely, the Haitians are causing a great havoc. You know, they're not incredibly the best. You know, it's been very difficult, I guess, to work with. They've been a little bit pushy, like compared to everybody else. So we got ourselves in a situation. You know, Biden has fomented this, and now he's alienated us, and now we're in a situation. You know, you're asking about all these immigrants that are coming in. You know, right now we're getting bused almost 4 to 6 buses a day. Our soft-sided facility here in Webb County is about to open on Friday. You know, they're making it for about 500 people. They're already starting to talk about 1,000 people. They're already sending out, I know our airports today are going to start getting flights out. We're sending out about 4 to 6 flights a day to Haiti. But the point is that where is he? All we're asking for is help. You know, it's very disturbing and I mean, our city already is spending $1.5 million. They just passed it to go ahead and bust some of these immigrants out. Why is this our responsibility? The burden's on us now? It makes no sense.
Big cost for local officials.
So, Judge Shannon Bream here, you mentioned the cost and the burden on the local officials, but what about the overall economy? What about employees, people who do work back and forth across the border, people whose lives they're changed, they're inconvenienced because of the situation that we have there?
I'm glad you stated that because, you know, it's been closed. It's very unfortunate. I don't know what's going on with America today, but I will can tell you that it's not right. You know, here we are, the people that are doing everything legally, that are trying, you know, they make it real nice in front of us to you know, wear our mask and, you know, your health is our highest priority. Well, I call BS on that because in all reality, what's going on with our southern borders is wide open. The very unfortunate thing is, to answer your question, is that we have families that have not been able to see each other. Here we are legally, you cannot go back and forth. Legally, you cannot. And we have a lot of people that live on both sides, that have families on both sides, that they basically come and go as they please. But right now, with the border closed, other than to commercial, it makes no sense. We don't understand what's going on. And so here we are, illegals, you know, immigration, you know, we're for legal immigration, but, you know, these immigrants that are coming back and forth makes no sense. So again, it's a failure in Biden's administration. Here we are, legally we can't. We are the #1 inland port in the United States. And it's hurting us. It's hurting our economy, and we need to open up our borders as well. Our border, our bridges.
Yeah, of course, the point person for the administration on the problems at the border is the Vice President Kamala Harris. Are you asking this administration, where's the Vice President in all of this?
Well, the sad part about it is they look at a picture. It's amazing how they look at one picture and they go off on it. But there's 1,000 pictures of everything else that's going on that's basically falling through the cracks, and yet nothing's been mentioned. You know what? I'm also going to give a very personal invitation to both the President of the United States and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, because look, 2 wrongs don't make a right. You can't stop. We cannot turn a blind eye on this anymore, people. And again, I've been saying it over and over again. This is not a border crisis. This is a national crisis. We have about 800,000 people that they have left here in the United States that are just here now. Now, the asylum seekers, you got to remember, 8 out of 10 asylum seekers are not going to get legally accepted here. So what's happening with all these people? Where are they going? It's a burden not just on the local economies on the border. It's a burden on the state of Texas. It's a burden on the country itself. I mean, people, we need to, you know, we're so fixated on this mask. We're so fixated on this pandemic, which is a problem in its own. But now you compound it with this? It just makes no sense. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to understand that we need help. And you know, when he asked the question yesterday, I believe, to the president, you know, what's going to happen with this? Well, we're going to get on this right away. I mean, why is he upset? We're Americans. We just need your help. We need you to protect us. We need you to take care of us. We need you to look at us and take care of us. That's all we need to do.
Well, I want to ask you this, Judge. The press secretary has been pressed on this today on a number of fronts, but she also said when she was pressed by our Peter Ducey yesterday about why we now have a fully vaccinated mandate for people who are traveling here internationally, but not the same requirement for people who are showing up at the southern border. She said, well, that's because those are people who don't intend to stay here long. And that's not the impression that most of us have. You're there, you meet these folks in your community, and these are human beings seeking a much better life and coming from oppression in a lot of places. But when they come to the U.S., is it your impression they do intend to stay?
Absolutely. I mean, wouldn't you? I'd be in that same boat. I'd be wanting to go ahead and do everything I can for my family. And yes, it's very important. It's a sad situation what's going on in their countries. And look, legally, I wouldn't have a problem with this, but illegally, it's causing a burden. And then here we are not protecting our own. It just really, it's falling through the cracks. We need help. It's important that we just definitely need them to come down and take a look at themselves, because when they start seeing these babies that are left in the brush, you know, we have Carrizo Cane right there on our river. You know, it's very sad. The last couple of days, we've been seeing children, babies left unattended because the mother and the father, for whatever reason, had to go somewhere. We're seeing all this incredible stuff. It's a sad situation. It's a humanitarian crisis. So once again, it's just a sad situation. Kamala Harris went to El Paso. Please, we invite you to come down here. Yeah. You know, our county judges, I've spoken to almost all of them. We're at our wits' end. Our mayors, we're at our wits' end. We don't know what to do anymore because you know what? It's damn if you do and damn if you don't. It's very unfortunate that even some people, I applaud you guys for even putting this on, because most of the country has kind of failed to see what's going on, because if it's not in every newscast, if it's not running the narrative, it's not true. Well, let me tell you, as a border town county judge, as a Democratic county judge, conservative Democratic county judge, I will tell you right now that it is true, it's happening in our border, and it's a sad situation that President Biden needs to take ownership. It doesn't matter what he did in Senate. It doesn't matter what he did in the past. Today, he has an opportunity to show the world what he is and who he is, and unfortunately, he hasn't done that.
Judge Tano Tiarina of Webb County, Texas, which we should say includes the city of Laredo. Thanks for spending time with us. Appreciate it today.
Local activists are also speaking out, saying they're appalled by the images and the White House's response. 23 ABC's Taylor Levesque joining us live downtown now after talking to a few activists about what they would like to see done. Taylor?
Haiti has become unfamiliar to many of its residents. Migrants who have attempted to leave the country are now being deported back. And footage of those migrants being chased down at the border has disturbed many right here in Bakersfield who say it's unacceptable.
I think everybody, regardless of like who you are and where you come from, is pretty alarmed by all of that.
This is the footage of U.S. Border Patrol officers on horseback using whips to contain Haitian migrants attempting to seek asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border around Del Rio, Texas.
To inflict more people that are destitute in an already horrific situation, I think is unconscionable.
Eaton and Associates immigration law specialist Wynn Eaton says under the law, it's not right.
That's not permitted under any system, law, or directive of Homeland Security or otherwise. And so those individual officers need and must be held to account.
Dalton Jones with local organization People's Budget Bakersfield says he's not surprised this is happening.
The Biden administration is just doing the exact same thing Trump would have done with nicer words.
The Biden administration has relied on public health law, Title 42, to remove Haitians from the border, denying them the opportunity to seek asylum.
Title 42 was never intended for this use. It was used or designed specifically to prevent individuals who had known issues and could spread disease in the United States, that those people could be excluded.
The law was created under the Trump administration during the early days of the pandemic. According to Title 42, Section 265, if there was a health risk, the law was intended to, quote, help prevent the introduction of COVID-19 into border facilities and into the United States. Persons subject to the order will not be held in congregate areas for processing and instead will immediately be expelled to their country of last transit. But Eaton says with the accessibility of the COVID-19 vaccine, the answer to this is to vaccinate migrants, not force them from seeking help.
The administration needs to reevaluate this policy.
Jones says People's Budget Bakersfield is focused on sending resources to assist Haitians.
I think we should be watching what is going on and doing everything in our power is like not just organizations and not just coalitions, but as like regular human individuals. Like, how can we help our brothers and sisters? Because like those Haitian folks, those people from Mexico and other Central American places, all of those people are our people. And if you choose to ignore that, you are the problem.
With Mexico's support, thousands of migrants have been removed from the border. Democrats are urging the Biden administration to end its use of pandemic-era authority. Live in Bakersfield, Taylor Levesque, 23 ABC, connecting you.
All right, the situation at the border out of control. Reports that the administration will be addressing it, as the president was saying yesterday to the United Nations, they will. But my next guest has his doubts, given what he's been dealing with. Lieutenant Chris Olivarez is the Texas Department of Public Safety. Lieutenant, let's first talk about the promise the president made to get on top of this, to deal with the problem. I'm paraphrasing here. Do you believe that?
Well, Neil, thanks for having me. So we've been talking about this since this crisis started earlier in the year, and nothing has been done by this administration. It's a failure on their part to secure the border, and that's why the state of Texas has stepped in. Governor Abbott has stepped in. He launched Operation Lone Star, which is an initiative deploying state resources to the southern border to secure the border. And with this current situation that took place this past week in Del Rio, we deployed hundreds of troopers to this area, and we were able to contain this area from any other surges that were taking place. And right now we have the situation, we have this area contained.
So, Lieutenant, when you hear the only thing that I see where the administration has promised action is on not your men exactly, but those on horseback who were, trying to gather Haitians who had come into the country or trying to cross the border. That they want to investigate. What did you think of that?
Well, they're taking that out of context. I spoke to those agents on horseback. I've been here ever since Saturday here in Del Rio. I spoke to those agents. Those are hardworking agents, and they do not need to be criticized right now, especially in this time of crisis. They need the support from the federal government. They're not getting the support. And this is a clear example of why the morale is low and there's no support from the federal government to criticize these agents for doing their job.
Yeah, and I understand from another one of your men or those who try to do what you do and just maintain some sort of order is that horseback is the only option in some of these areas. Having said that, did it surprise you that that is what the administration is interested in investigating for the time being, not the other things that have made this an uncontrollable situation?
Right, and it did it, Neil. Of course, we've been seeing this from case to case throughout this year, and that's why the morale is low with some of our border agents. But they continue to work hard, and we're continuing to show support, and we're here to provide support for them. And this situation here could have been contained. It could have been under control from the beginning of this year, but the administration has failed to do its part to secure the border. So we stepped in, the state of Texas stepped in, and we are securing the border at this time by containing this area. And since then, Neil, there has not been any groups of migrants coming across this area here by the International Bridge in Del Rio.
Very, very quickly, Lieutenant, we do know that a judge had recently ruled to flip this idea that you couldn't adjudicate these cases in the United States rather than go to Mexico. So right now, the call is not to have them, dealt with in the United States, but in Mexico. But that is still happening, and where they go to the U.S. and it's settled there, ignoring this judge's order. What do you make of that?
Well, it is, Neil, and that's why this occurred this past week when you had almost 15,000 migrants surge the border. It was out of control, and if we didn't respond, if our DPS troopers did not respond, it would have been catastrophic. But that just goes to show you that the administration right now is not securing the border, and that is why Governor Abbott has launched this operation to secure the border. He has met with local officials. He has met with law enforcement to find out what the concerns are and find solutions, and that's what we're doing right now. But the federal government does need to step in. They need to support their agents.
All right. Lieutenant, thank you very, very much. Chris Olivarez, the Texas Department of Public Safety, just trying to get a handle on the situation.
Let's get you back to the crisis at the border.
Here's our Adam Bennett in Del Rio as migrants were brought to Houston today.
A faith-based group here in Del Rio is organizing these charter bus trips. Yesterday, they received nearly 400 people. That's triple the daily average from August. And today, they expect it to be their busiest day yet. Outside the Valverde Border Humanitarian Coalition building in Del Rio, these migrants took the last few steps toward one of the last legs of a long journey.
Are you excited? Are you heading to Houston?
I'm very, very excited.
Rabiatu Yunusa spent nearly a week under the International Bridge in Del Rio with her 3-year-old daughter, Layla.
Very terrifying. Had to sleep on the floor. Muy felices, de verdad, por eso.
Juliandre Perche of Venezuela says she's very happy the way this country has received her since arriving last week. Border Patrol has been bringing migrants here from the International Bridge and other processing stations.
I'm Haitian, and I'm also a product of this type of migration.
Now, Lana Marcias is an immigration attorney. She's here explaining the process to migrants.
For most of them, the documents that they have it doesn't have an actual court date. Most of them, what they're asking them is to follow up with the ICE office within 60 days.
The operations director here says migrants are putting memories of whatever happened under the bridge behind them.
The people here are focused on going to their final destination.
On the highway to Houston and a wide open future. The operations director says her group organizes these bus trips, but it's up to migrants to pay their own way. She also said that today, fewer than 6,000 people remain in that camp underneath the International Bridge. That's down from a peak of 16,000 over the weekend. Reporting from Del Rio, Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News.
For the very latest now, we can talk to the journalist Amélie Baron, who's on the line now from the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince. Amélie, you spent some time in the past few days at the airport just after those deportation flights touched down. What have people on those planes been telling you about how they feel being back in Haiti, often after having spent many years outside the country?
Well, as soon as they get off the bus that took them from the plane directly, these Asian all testify about the terrible condition and inhuman treatment they had suffered in the detention center in Texas. They said they had spent several days without being able to even take a shower. They were sleeping directly on the concrete with a simple emergency blanket to cover themselves and there was the AC that was at maximum level in the building. So returning to Port-au-Prince is traumatic for them because it signs the end of their exile, the economic exile. They left Haiti to migrate to Brazil and Chile, seeking for a better life. They worked several years in Latin America, but without legal paper, and so Chile took more severe migration policies, so they tried their luck and they sold everything to move up the American continent, heading north, to going to the U.S. And so this journey, they took 1 or 3 months. It cost them several thousand U.S. dollars per person, and it's one of the most dangerous migration because as they cross the jungle between Colombia and Panama, they were at the mercy of smugglers who do not hesitate to rape women and to kill those who do not have enough to pay.
And Amélie, as I mentioned, the United Nations is now saying that actually these deportations could be a violation of international law because of what's happening at the moment in Haiti. You're there in the capital. Tell us, what's the situation like?
Well, the Haitian who left, they left the country with its difficulties because they couldn't find a job. But now the country is in a much worse situation than before. Unemployment has increased. People are struggling to find enough food. There are more than 60% of the population who is living with less than $2 per day. And also since last year, insecurity has been rising as armed gangs are gaining strength and are now controlling wider parts in the country, especially in the capital Port-au-Prince. The country also, let's remind, is facing a deep political crisis as it has no more legitimate leaders since the president, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated in his bedroom by an armed commando on July 7th. And on top of all that, just a month ago, the south half of the Haiti has been devastated by a 7.2 earthquake that has destroyed thousands of homes and schools.
Amélie Baron for us there in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting today.
Also joining us from Texas is Karl Rove. He's right here on the couch. He's a contributor. He's a former deputy chief of staff to President George W. Bush. He's a resident of Texas. The perfect guest to come in and tell us what's happening in Texas.
It's a mess. That's what's happening.
Democrats want no part of this story.
None. And it's amazing to me that the government has an obligation to tell us what it's doing. And you'll notice nobody has come out and said, here's what we're doing. Here's how many we sent back to Haiti. Here's how many we're distributing inside the United States. Here's the reason why we're taking some people and returning them and the reason why we're allowing some people to remain in the United States. We have found out, however, normally what they do is they take and they say, you're here illegally, but there are reasons that allow you to remain here, but we're going to give you a court date.
Right.
Instead, they're now saying, here's a notice to appear before Border Patrol agents,
right,
which does not carry with it the same kind of penalties.
Of course not.
It's
How do
catch
you
and release.
locate them to tell them when to come to court? I mean, we don't. It's impossible. Pete Hegseth was just on earlier, Karl, and he said that these flights are going out into the interior of the country with these illegal immigrants, Haitian and otherwise.
ICE flights.
Yeah, ICE flights, exactly. In the middle of the night. So there's your transparency for you. If it was all on the up and up, why wouldn't it happen in the middle of the day? Why don't we know the numbers?
I don't make much of the middle of the night because they process them during the day and they may launch the flight at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, but they're just trying to get them. But we need to know. Yeah. And you'll notice yesterday, Senator Johnson from your home state.
Actually, you want to see?
Yeah,
Here's
absolutely.
some of the exchange that got everyone frustrated, except for Mayorkas himself. Listen.
How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
Well, Karl,
it's basic.
The secretary doesn't want to admit the numbers. They know the numbers. Bill Malugin sent out a tweet yesterday, and he said, according to Texas Department of Public Safety, as of this morning, there were 332 husband-wife combinations where the wife is pregnant under the bridge in Del Rio. Now, we're going to break down the numbers and figure this out. All right. There were 6,700 family units. We know the government, the Biden administration is going to let them in. 1,500 single males, they're going to have to go back. 493 single females, they get to stay too.
Yeah, and remember, this number's constantly changing because it's not like we have a static group of 14,000 people there. They're constantly flowing across the border, and they're constantly being either returned to Haiti or more likely released into the United States. And let's go back to the beginning of this, though. Why are all the Haitians who have been by and large throughout Central and South America for much of the past year, why are they now showing up? There's some kind of an organized effort there, and if we got to the bottom of it, I would not be surprised if it were not the cartel saying, hey, you're Haitian, guess what? The Estados Unidos is going to let you in. Give us $1,000, give us $2,000. We'll help you get up there, and you'll be home free.
Well, Karl, that's because in May, the administration gave them temporary protected status for another 18 months.
Right, because of the earthquake and
in 2010.
From years ago,
yeah.
Can I ask you a question? So a lot of people speculate that the reason why the Biden administration has essentially opened our borders is that they think A, they believe in open borders, but B, that in the future they will benefit politically from all these new immigrants or illegal immigrants who will eventually be voters. My question to you, because you know the politics, Texas is a hotly debated, contested state. A lot of Democrats dream of taking Texas. What are the politics in Texas of this? Are there enough migrants to turn that, or are they turning off Democrats in such great numbers that it's not going to benefit them?
In physics, I think it's a Newton law. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Just remember, what are the counties in America that moved more dramatically towards the Republicans in 2020 as compared to 2016? And you'll find a bunch of them are the heavily Hispanic counties along the Rio Grande River. Part of it was energy, because a lot of those people work in the energy business. But a lot of it was, wait a minute, it's our communities who are being adversely affected first by illegal immigration. You know, it's our hospitals, it's our social services, it's our compassion, it's the safety of our neighborhoods that's being affected. And that was a big reason why a lot of Tejanos said, you know what, I'm voting Republican, because they're saying we ought to have a border. We came here legally, or we came through a process. These people are not, and they're hurting our communities.
56% of Texas residents were asked, Texas Hispanic residents were asked about the performance of President Biden. 56% disapproved of his performance in Texas. That's not a good sign if you want to turn Texas blue.
No, and look, we got Robert Francis O'Rourke getting ready to run for governor. He is about as far left wing as you can. He will not be well received in a generally conservative community that is pro-family, pro-life, pro-military, pro-America, pro-small business, pro-enterprise.
He's got a lot of money.
We'll see.
There are real consequences, though. I have a friend who lives in Mission, Texas, who says that the hospitals are absolutely overwhelmed and that American children are having to travel 100 miles away to the hospital.
Corpus Christi to get service.
Because the services in their local hospitals are filled with illegal immigrant
Absolutely
children.
true. I was in Corpus Christi not too long ago, and somebody said, we got a lot of people coming up here for elective surgery at our hospitals because they can't be taken care of in Edinburgh or McAllen or Brownsville or Harlingen.
So Donald Trump pretty much stopped the flow, at the end of his administration. Then Joe Biden turned it back on. Obviously, when you're the president, you've got vast power over how the laws of the United States are implemented. But ultimately, if people want to get anything changed, and when you were in the Bush administration, George Bush tried to get immigration reform done. And, for a variety of reasons, he couldn't even get his own party to do it.
Well, it wasn't his own party that killed it. It was President Barack Obama and then Senator Obama who promised to support comprehensive immigration reform, voting for all of the killer amendments offered by Democratic Senator Dorgan of North Dakota, helped by Senator Harry Reid. So just to set that
They didn't
through.
get to the reconciliation, right?
Yeah.
Well, so how do we fix it? It's got to come from Congress.
First, you've got to start by border security. It took us 4 years or almost 5 years to end catch and release, to get in place all of the processes necessary to say to people, if you come here, you're not going to be able to be released out into society and escape consequences. So first thing you got to do is secure the border. That's why it is smart for Governor Abbott to say, if the federal government will not spend the money to build the wall, we'll spend $2 billion of Texas money to build the wall and the unfinished places in order to get better control over our border. And it's why Texas is spending tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every biennium for additional law enforcement along the border, because it's our community that's being affected, and the federal government under this administration will not step up and do the job that it's responsible for.
That drone team has put more pressure on the Biden administration than anything else, because no one can deny the horror.
And that smart young reporter at the White House named Peter Ducey, who keeps asking questions they don't want to answer.
Inconvenient questions.
Who is that guy anyway? Where did he come from?
He's got some really good hair. I'm just saying. Carl, thank you very much.
You bet. Great to see y'all.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Just following up on this very basic but very important question. You're telling us that the DHS chief has the most recent numbers about how many of these Haitians under the bridge have been sent back and how many have been released into the U.S. The DHS chief is telling us that he doesn't know. So who else can we ask?
You can certainly ask the Department of Homeland Security. I am confident, Peter. I am confident he wanted to have the most up-to-date numbers, and we will venture to get you those. I promise you this afternoon.
Is this an issue of not knowing, or is this an issue of a lot more people are being released into the U.S. than are being sent out?
That is certainly not the issue. First, I think it's important to reiterate what I conveyed earlier about what the actual process is. Individuals are expelled under Title 42. If they can't be expelled under Title 42, they are put into a removal process. If they are put into a removal process, they're either transported to an ICE facility or released with a legal document. That legal document includes fingerprints, photos, phone numbers, an address in the United States, and a background check. That's the process that transpires. That's a part of our immigration process, regardless of where you're coming from.
And just because you keep using Title 42 to defend this administration's immigration policies, that is a Trump-era regulation. You guys came in saying that the Trump-era immigration policy was very inhumane.
Title 42 is not an immigration policy. It is a health authority because we're in the middle of a pandemic. The Trump administration approach to immigration was inhumane and was immoral. That's why we need to put a new policy in place, and we need Congress to pass that policy.
Unified control, democratic control of Congress. Many months in office, you have not even tried.
That's not actually true. There's been a Peter, just factual here. There's been a bill proposed first day in office. Currently, it was proposed as a part of steps were proposed as part of the reconciliation process. Right, the parliamentarian rejected that proposal. They're going back and proposing new options. President supports that. He would like to see immigration reform pass into law, more humane processes.
Just one more. Has President Biden ever been to the southern border?
In his life?
Yes.
I will have to look back in my history books and check the times he's been to the southern border.
We have been looking all morning, and we cannot find any record of him visiting the border as president, vice president, senator, or even as a concerned citizen. Why would that be?
I can check and see when the last time or when he may have been. But tell me more about why you're asking.
Because this is a president who makes a point when there are disasters in this country, like a wildfire or a hurricane, to go and see for himself firsthand what the needs are of the local community so that he can have an informed POV to make policy. Why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he go down to Del Rio, Texas and see what's going on?
Well, first of all, Peter, I think the situation at the border is the result of a broken system. And the president certainly relies on his experience. So whether it was the work he did to address root causes as vice president, his efforts when he was in the Senate to support comprehensive immigration reform, steps that at a time were being done and worked toward in a bipartisan way, something that certainly we think should be the case today. He uses all of his experiences to inform how he governs, how he approaches challenges, and certainly he looks again at the last 4 years and the separation of children who were ripped from the arms of their parents as a way he does not want to proceed. So all of his experiences and his time in office, whether vice president or Senate, inform his approach to issues.
New at 4:30, a Maryland member of the notorious street gang MS-13 is sentenced to more than 3 decades in prison. 23-year-old Moises Alexis Reyes Canales of Annapolis was sentenced to 35 years for conspiracy to participate in a racketeering enterprise in connection with gang activities. That includes a murder and 2 attempted murders. Reyes Canales attempted participating in the murder of a suspected rival gang member, and he conspired in the attempted murder of 2 other victims.
A dangerous international gang member arrested in South Florida.
The MS-13 gang is considered one of the worst in the world and often try to infiltrate in communities where they can fly under the radar. As CBS 12's Al Pefley reports, this latest member has already been deported once before.
Border Patrol agents say they arrested an El Salvadorian national near Fort Lauderdale September 10th. They say he was previously deported from the U.S., but somehow found his way back here into this country.
They're probably one of the most revered and feared international gangs, and certainly here in the United States.
Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan, who now works as a criminal defense attorney, spent 15 years with the FBI. He says the fact that a documented MS-13 gang member from El Salvador has been nabbed in South Florida should be of concern.
And there is no doubt that MS-13, given their history of violence, that it can and will and does affect our safety here.
MS-13 is a notorious street gang known to have terrorized El Salvador and parts of Central America.
Mr. Fuentes, you are here on a first-degree murder charge.
Several years ago, 6 alleged members of MS-13 were charged in 2 South Florida murders in Palm Beach County.
Their intent wasn't just to rob, but rob and murder.
MS-13 has spread to several states. There are believed to be at least 10,000 members living in various communities across the U.S.
These gang members aren't large in numbers compared to other gangs, but when they act out, they're extremely violent.
Experts say MS-13 has been linked to murder, murder for hire, extortion, drugs, sex trafficking, and child pornography. They often target the migrant population, knowing there's little chance their victims will report the crime to police because they're in the U.S. illegally and don't want to risk being deported. And some believe MS-13 is now a growing threat in the U.S. because of the relative ease of gang members to slip across the southern border with Mexico and enter the United States.
Certainly, I think with the issues at the border, there is no doubt it's on the increase because you basically have a lack of enforcement at the borders now with respect to people just coming across the borders, in droves.
A Border Patrol spokesman said they could not release any details on the arrest of the MS-13 gang member, including his name, saying it's an active investigation and to release details now could jeopardize the case. He did say it's a significant arrest that could lead to other arrests. In West Palm Beach, Al Pefley, CBS 12 News.
Back in 2019, an MS-13 gang member shot an undercover PBSO agent in the face in Palm Beach Gardens. That deputy has recovered. The 32-year-old gang member was shot and killed by nearby deputies.
And MS-13 started in Los Angeles in the 1980s, and as Al mentioned, the gang now has more than 10,000 members in at least 40 states and the District of Columbia.